Donald Trump is in the building, and the former president getting a standing ovation from the assembled masses.
President Trump, you're the man, bro. It is a damn travesty what they're doing to you. I'll be donating to you, my man. Let's get it done.
Well, ever since Donald Trump was convicted, financial support for him has exploded. We just saw this UFC star pledging to donate to Trump's campaign, and many, many others are doing the same. Trump was convicted on Thursday, and within 10 hours of the verdict, Americans donated $39 million, a record amount which overloaded his fundraising website.
They raised with small money donors, meaning like $21, $42, $53, $38, a record $39 million in about a 10-hour period.
And donations have been pouring in ever since, about $70 million in small donations, which was tripled by even more generous Trump-friendly billionaires.
If you add the large dollar donations to it, you're over $200 million.
That's $200 million over just 3 days, a record amount and far higher than the Biden campaign over the same period. No wonder Democrats are panicking.
It's a sad day for this country. I'm still shocked and amazed that his supporters would follow him with the lies and distortions that he continues to give to the American people.
Well, she may be shocked, but anyone who knows Trump supporters know they simply don't trust the justice system to be fair with him, which is why Trump's top 3 fundraising days are the day he was convicted, the day he was arraigned or called into court to enter his plea, and then the day his mugshot was released, relating to a different case in Georgia. So Donald Trump has all this money to spend on his campaign, but where will he be between now and Election Day in 5 months' time? Will he be sentenced to prison, house arrest, or just a fine? We'll be getting some free legal advice from our 2 lawyers in just a moment, but first, a quick reminder of what Trump was actually convicted of.
All rise.
Here in New York, historic moment in American history, the verdict in the first criminal trial ever against a former president of the United States.
An unbelievable moment.
The judge came out and said that the jury had reached a verdict. Everyone in the courtroom gasped. When the jury came in, everyone was quiet. Trump stared straight ahead. He didn't look at the jury, and he just stared with his arms folded.
Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 charges.
Guilty.
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 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, all tied to those hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels.
It was not about the payoff, and it was not about the sex, and it was not actually about the women. It was about the falsification of campaign funds. It was falsifying his business deals.
Each felony carries a potential sentence of up to 4 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. That will be up to the judge during the sentencing.
Key witness in the New York hush money case, the former Trump attorney Michael Cohen,
is one of the central figures in this trial. He was the one who arranged the payments between Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels.
For years, Mr. Cohen has acted like he is above the law.
Remember, with Michael Cohen, he is a disbarred attorney. He's a serial perjurer. He's a convicted felon. He admitted during this trial he embezzled $60,000 from President Trump.
Everyone in the Trump organization was a criminal and a liar and a crook, except for the boss, who was not. So that seems like kind of a hard case to argue.
I expected there'd be some form of a hung jury. Why? Because I thought that there'd be some jurors who might look at why the case was brought.
We had a DA who was a failed DA. We have a judge who's highly conflicted. Some of the witnesses that were on our side, they were literally crucified by this man who looks like an angel, but he's really a devil. It was a rigged trial.
Then you had a jury that was, from a certain persuasion.
It's a glorified misdemeanor that they've turned into 34 felonies. This is a result of the justice system being weaponized, and they had this in New York where they know, getting a jury to convict Donald Trump in New York is pretty easy. People hate his guts there.
Since I watch CNN so that you don't have to, I put together a couple clips.
Even if you believe the prosecution's theory of the case, that Michael Cohen was doing this, and Alan Weisselberg was doing that, and McConney was doing this, and all these people were doing all this stuff, I don't know that they've proven that Donald Trump knew.
They have not.
Yeah.
They absolutely have not.
There is reasonable doubt
all over this case.
Now, the question is going to be, for every single elected Republican, from the Speaker of the House down, who do you support? Who is right? Is it the American justice system and what has been delivered, or is it Donald Trump?
We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man.
Let's bring in our two lawyers now, and we have the former New York prosecutor, Vinny Varghese, and we have Michael Cohen's former attorney, Lanny Davis. Welcome to both of you. Now, let's imagine we're in court, and the viewers are the jury. And Vinny, I'd like you to start with your opening argument, okay? Give us a minute on why Trump should never have been on trial and why he definitely shouldn't have been found guilty.
Well, the district attorney in this case used a novel legal theory, which was, we actually were unsure of what it was, because the judge instructed the jury that the underlying crime was that the DA didn't have to prove the underlying crime. So was it federal election fraud? Was it tax fraud? Was it New York State tax fraud? I mean, so there was a number of problems that his lawyers had. But even before you get there, this information was available to the district attorney back in 2018. Michael Cohen pled guilty in 2018 to these cases in August of 18. So at that point, the state could have brought a prosecution then and decided not to. In fact, the prior district attorney chose not to pursue this avenue against President Trump. But when the new district attorney, Alvin Bragg, came in, what they did was rely on exceptions or exclusions to speedy trial and the statute of limitations that were put in place during COVID lockdowns to get around the statute of limitations and bring this case against Donald Trump. And the only reason at this point, when you have this use of these legal theories, which were never used before in a New York State court, has to be somewhat, in a way, for all the people that support Trump, there's a sound argument that this is politically motivated. And I can say for certain that in the most rabidly anti-Trump place in America, which is in Manhattan, my office sits here in Wall Street, and I'm a 10-minute walk to the courthouse, that Trump did not stand a fair chance, and his case should have been moved to the suburbs where it's much more split or much more purple.
Lanny Davis, over to you for your rebuttal.
First of all, my sympathies to my colleague, Vinu. He's facing a unanimous jury verdict and the opportunity to appeal on everything that he just said. Ironically, Mr. Trump appealing under the rule of law, he's willing to do that, but he doesn't accept the rule of law in other situations. So let me start with the most important response. A unanimous jury verdict after a trial in which the cross-examination was brutal against Michael Cohen. They heard everything and they unanimously returned a guilty verdict. That jury, with 12 people, according to registration statistics that Mr. Trump cites, are likely to contain 2 or 3 or at least one Trump juror who decided beyond a reasonable doubt that his preferred or her preferred presidential candidate was guilty. So the politicization argument simply falls because that jury was unanimous, including at least presumably 1 or 2 Trump verdicts. Secondly, to attack the motivation or the timing of this prosecution is ironic, since it was Mr. Trump's federal prosecutors who said that Mr. Trump directed Mr. Cohen to do the crime. They charged Mr. Cohen with a serious crime. This is Mr. Trump's federal prosecutors in 2018 who worked for the Trump Justice Department, charged the crime. Mr. Cohen did the time, and Mr. Trump's prosecutors filed a public paper in 2018 in which they said Mr. Trump directed, that's their word, directed Mr. Cohen to do the crime. He did the time. So to complain about the charge when the same charge was brought against Mr. Cohen and he went to prison, and the same federal prosecutors working for Mr. Trump's Justice Department published a document and said that Mr. Trump directed Mr. Cohen to do the crime. I rely on the federal prosecutors working for Mr. Trump in support of this prosecution.
And now the opening statements are over and done with. We've allowed you to make comments uninterrupted. The gloves are off. Vinny, I'd like you to challenge those points from Lanny Davis, please.
Well, first, let me say I have tremendous respect for Lanny Davis and his career. I was telling you before we went on that I was sitting when he spoke at some panel that I had attended about 20 years ago. So, but I have to disagree with Lanny here. The fact that federal prosecutors charged Michael Cohen and said that he was directed by individual one or whatever it was called back then in 2018, who happened to be the president of the United States, is even more reason why the state at that time could have come in and brought a case against Trump under state law. But that's because the prior district attorney, Cy Vance, knew better, that he wasn't going to try President Trump in state court, or once he left the office, in state court for a violation of federal election law. So if you want to use what Lanny did is what we call in the law bootstrapped, to basically say that this prosecution was legitimate by bootstrapping statements that were unproven, because Trump was never charged in terms of federal election fraud, federal election law, violations of federal election law by federal prosecutors, and they could have charged him once he left office. They never did that. So to bootstrap, to try to increase the legitimacy of this prosecution by saying that prosecutors accused him of working with Cohen, I don't think is viable at this point.
Let's move it on.
Let's move it on, professor.
Let's move it on slightly. Lenny, the 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. I understand that falsifying business records on its own is regarded as a misdemeanor. It has to be associated with a second crime, and there seems to be a lot of confusion about what that second crime was. Can you explain what it was?
It's very easy to explain what the federal prosecutors described as a federal crime. With all due respect to my friend, and thank you for your kind words, Vinu, there were several state crimes articulated, and the jury heard the judge instruct them on the state crimes. The state crime is falsifying business records in order to conceal the crime of a campaign finance violation under New York state law, as well as under federal law. And that campaign finance violation was what the federal prosecutors called a serious blow to our democracy. It wasn't about sex and hush money, according to federal prosecutors working for Donald Trump. It was about buying silence before an election, which is a crime under federal law and under state law. So the two crimes together, the jury found the facts supported violations by Mr. Trump of both crimes, and they found that unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt. Most people, including myself, were thinking there would be a hung jury because one or two Trump-oriented jurors would not vote for conviction.
But sorry, were there actually one or two Trump-orientated jurors? I hear there were not.
So I use the expression presumably because of the arguments made by my colleague that this is a Manhattan, New York area where there are heavy Democrats versus Republicans. So if you take 12 people,
around 95% voted against Trump. Professor Alan Dershowitz said it was necessary for the prosecution to prove that Donald Trump actually knew that the payments were being made by Cohen as a non-disclosure agreement, and that it was being misfiled, if you like, or as something else. And nobody could prove that in court. Nobody did prove that in court.
Can I give your viewers a larger picture response? The big picture is that a sitting president of the United States has been convicted by 12 people unanimously, and I said presumably one of those 12 voted for Donald Trump, but it doesn't matter. The big picture is that if any of my colleagues' concerns that sound very respectable to me are valid, the rule of law still prevails. Mr. Trump is taking advantage of that to appeal to the New York Appellate Court. And if that doesn't work, to the New York State Supreme Court, which is called the Court of Appeals. He will take advantage of the rule of law, and it doesn't matter whether I'm right on this program or whether Vinu is right. The rule of law will decide because he has a right to appeal. The ironic fact is that whatever the motives, whatever the timing, a jury of 12 people, a system that we derived from the UK common law system, the jury system and the judicial system usually works. It's not perfect. And now we'll see if Mr. Trump takes advantage and whether Vinu is right about the legal defects. But that's the rule of law. Okay. The very same principle that Mr. Trump rejects all the time.
Okay, let's move on
to me is the irony that the man that rejects the rule of law is now able to use the rule of law to overturn to see if Vinu is correct in what he says.
I will say this, Matthew, let me just add this, just jumping on what Lanny says. The problem is that it is my view that this is an improper prosecution on multiple legal grounds. And while he has the ability to follow the rule of law and appeal, that process can take years. And there is no doubt in my mind that this judge is going to sentence Mr. Trump to some period of incarceration. If I had to bet, I would think probably a split sentence of 90 days in jail and 5 years probation, because now, regardless of my view on the prosecution, this is something that Lanny and I can agree on. Mr. Trump has now been convicted 34 times of committing felonies. So what's an appropriate jail sentence there? I think the judge is going to want to, because I do know this judge. I've appeared in front of him, and he has a reputation for being harsh. So he's going to give him some jail time or perhaps make him do community service.
But presumably that jail time will be stayed till after the election, after the appeal?
No. I think he's going to set an example and perhaps give him some kind of split sentence, which would allow him to come out before November. So I think this will be very interesting on July 11th.
Come in, Lanny.
I do not want Donald Trump incarcerated for one day. I don't think that helps America. I don't think that does justice. Donald Trump has been held accountable for all the work that I and
He committed 34 felonies, Lenny. You just said he was convicted.
I do not favor, just wanted to insert that I don't favor the incarceration of an ex-president. He's been held accountable under the rule of law, and however long it takes to see whether you're right or not, let's have the rule of law operate, but I don't favor incarceration.
Okay, we're just going to pause for 1 second whilst we look at how this conviction is affecting Donald Trump's election campaign. Is he now more or less likely to win in November? Here's a quick look at the political fallout since the conviction.
Being convicted in America in some circumstances prevents you from voting, but extraordinarily, it doesn't prevent you from running for the White House, even if you're in prison.
I'm supposed to go to jail for 187 years.
It's happened before. In 1920, the socialist leader Eugene Debs ran for president while serving a 10-year sentence for sedition. He won nearly 1 million votes, over 3% of the electorate. At first glance, Trump's conviction doesn't appear to have hurt his campaign. In fact, right after he was convicted, donations to his re-election campaign exploded, crashing the fundraising website.
They raised with small money donors, meaning like $21, $42, $53, $38, a record $39 million in about a 10-hour period.
Polls taken soon after the verdict was announced suggest Trump has actually picked up support among voters who said the conviction made a difference to them.
Because the people of our country know it's a hoax.
Of course, Trump's ability to campaign, and there's still 5 months to go, could be affected by his sentence. While a few legal experts predict he'll be imprisoned, most believe, as Trump is a first-time offender, he'll just be fined, possibly confined to his home. Even if that happens, Trump's daughter-in-law, the co-chair of the Republican National Committee, says he'll fight on.
But we'll turn lemons into lemonade like Donald Trump continues to do at every single turn. We will have him doing virtual rallies and campaign events.
The judge will sentence Trump on July 11th, just 4 days before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where the party should officially accept Trump as their presidential nominee. It's normally a great occasion. But Trump will be the first ever convicted felon to receive his party's nomination, which you'd think could cast a pall over proceedings. But then again, this is Donald Trump.
We're going to make America great again. We're going to make it better than ever before. November 5th, remember, November 5th is the most important day in the history of our country. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, back to our guest now. Vinu, the donations actually went up a lot after Donald Trump became a convicted criminal. Why?
You have to understand the support for Trump, and I'll speak personally, I couldn't understand it in 2016. I gave money to Hillary Clinton. I had previously donated to Obama. I could not understand how anybody could vote for Trump, and I would say half of them probably hold their nose and vote for him because they agree with his policies, and then the other half genuinely like him. To understand him, you have to see Dave Chappelle's skit on Saturday Night Live, or opening monologue, where he speaks about why Trump was and why people believe in Trump, because he speaks in a way that is that of an outsider, and he is a political outsider. He's not a political insider, and he attacked Hillary Clinton and said that, hey, people like you use the system, because when she attacked him about not paying taxes, and he goes, you don't want to change the tax code because you benefit from it. So this is just another example of the drain the swamp philosophy or slogan that he had used, that the swamp has now come to get him. And certainly when you are the Republican candidate, and remember in 2016 people said, hey, you can't vote for Trump because America will turn into a banana republic because he'll put his political opponents in jail. Well, he never put Hillary Clinton in jail. Instead, today in 2024, under the Biden administration, he's the one seeing jail time, and he's supposed to be the next candidate for the Republican Party.
This conviction has actually had the effect of making Donald Trump look even more like the outsider, and people who think that the judicial system is rigged actually now favor him more.
So let me give you the math as opposed to a political opinion. America has a 40% base that love Donald Trump. That's the base contributing to him. So does the Democratic Party have a base that will contribute to any Democratic president regardless. Now there's a middle, 40-40 leaves 20. Within that 20%, there's probably 10% who are persuadable one way or the other. This election for the President of the United States is decided by that 10%. So whatever you see in contributions coming from the base are not going to be able to predict the result. We're down to a 10% electorate that doesn't like Trump, doesn't like Biden, and is persuadable. Don't count me in that. I'm hopeless. I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. But I will say that we should be talking about what persuades those 10%. The data so far shows, focus groups and data, that 10% in only 7 states, that's it, the rest of the 43 states don't matter. 7 states will decide, the next president of the United States, that 10% is persuadable, are up for grabs. And I don't know who they're going to go for, but right now they don't like Donald Trump. That's what the data shows, but they're not yet converting to being for Joe Biden. So we'll have to see.
But why do you think the conviction excited his donors so much that he then received $39 million in 10 hours and $200 million over 3 days?
Just as long as in your reporting you don't speak about American voters and you speak about his base, I was just correcting that part. The answer is they're loyal to him. They believe in him. They are dedicated Trump supporters. And I would say not too much different from Democrats who are loyal to their Democratic Party nominee, to their progressive ideology.
Okay.
So
but you've made a distinction. Sorry, you've made a distinction between his base and American voters. I mean, we have to accept his base are American voters, and not only that, he is now polling at twice what he was with African Americans than compared to his 2020 campaign. So how do you explain his growing popularity with Black Americans and Hispanics?
So when you again speak in those terms without having a caveat, it's not accurate. So if you go from 10% to 20% among African Americans, you've doubled your number. There are 80% African Americans supporting Joe Biden. But I wouldn't put too much stock in the current polling on anybody, including a small percentage of the population.
Vinny?
I would agree in large part of what Lanny just said. The issue is how many of these people will actually come out to vote, and whether the increased support means increased support amongst registered voters, because that's the key. How many of these registered voters that now support Trump are going to vote for him? Remember, Trump carried Miami-Dade in the last election, and the issue is whether in those 7 states, I think really, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, if you take the black voters and they don't come out in masse for Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden's going to lose those states and Trump carries the Electoral College.
Vinu Varghese and Lanny Davis, thank you both very much for your analysis today on The Nexus. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.